Hello again, folks. Martin Lehner here from Orange Technology. And in this video, I want to talk about something a little more futuristic, something a little more out there. In the last few videos, I've talked about a few kind of real world sort of things, especially for those of us in the technology space. But in this video, I actually want to talk about what the future looks like for technology and some of the things we need to start thinking about. So I'm sure everybody's heard about the self-driving car, right? So Google's got one. Word is Apple is going to do one too, but I don't think we've seen it, or I've missed that, whatever. But Google's got this autonomous driving car that's been driving around the United States for quite some time now. It's actually gotten into a few accidents, believe it or not. I believe all, if not most of those, were actually occurred when the person who was sitting in the car took manual control of the car, which is an interesting thing to think about. But yeah, so for those of you who don't know, the Tesla, which is not a manufacturer that makes electric cars, um, they have it's not really a self-driving car, but it will stay in its lane. So if you're on the freeway, you can set your car to automatically stay in its lane, and it will turn for you, and it will follow the road and things like that, and it will brake and speed up, I think, and things like that. There's a couple of videos on YouTube. If you haven't seen that yet, check it out. It is pretty cool, definitely pretty cool. Um, but really the future is the autonomous driving car, right? I mean, maybe it's 20 years from now, maybe it's 30 years from now, maybe it's 50 years from now. I would argue it's sooner than later. My guess is you'll be able, in about 15 to 20 years, you will be able to start buying the mass-produced, completely self-driving car that does not have a steering wheel in it. Does not have a steering wheel in it. And I would argue actually what will push the manufacture and sale of those cars is the insurance industry. Um, you know, Quite frankly, if you're a 16-year-old and you just got your license, your insurance is going to be pretty cheap if you have a self-driving car, because why do you even need a license, really, right? Um, Whereas if you want to drive by yourself manually, I bet that's going to become pretty expensive. So I think what's going to happen is we're going to have a hybrid system where there's going to be autonomous cars and cars where you're still able to drive them that are completely manual. Um, but I would argue that the reason that eventually society will completely shift to the autonomous car will be insurance based, right? So right now, insurance is based on everybody being able to manually drive. As soon as you start having these autonomous cars and the rate of accidents with the autonomous cars goes down quite a bit, I think you'll see insurance companies start to jack the rates on the manual cars to encourage people to move to the automated vehicles. Anyways, that all aside, the autonomous car does exist. So what's going to happen is that industry will continue to grow, and we will see more and more of these on the road. At some point, they will be mass produced, and again, in my opinion, at some point we will only see those, or we will see very, very few manual cars. Now, again, what does this mean for technology professionals and those of us using that new technology, that new vehicle, that new paradigm of transportation, really. And I came across this article, and I will say this wasn't my own thought. I'm not a genius by any means, but this article came up. I don't remember where I saw it. I saw it on the web somewhere, but it was shared across numerous news sites. And it's a question of, will your self-driving car kill you? That's kind of an odd question, right? So obviously I saw the headline. I clicked on it. What does that mean? And it's an interesting thought. So take, for example, your self-driving car is driving along on the highway. You're sitting there reading a book or doing whatever. And your car, let's say that that you're driving on a stretch of highway that's, say, one lane, okay, and there's just a cliff on the other side. There isn't really much of a shoulder. There's just a cliff on the one side. It's one of those kind of mountain pass type roads. one lane one way, one lane the other way, and your car is driving along. Okay, and you're plugging along at 100 kilometers an hour, 60 miles an hour, and you run into a situation. Okay, so let's say there's a few semi trucks that are coming the other way. Right, they're going the other way. They're going the same speed. They're going nice and fast. You're in a small little car. You're in your lane. They're in their lane. They're passing you. Right in front of you, a group of bicyclists has an accident. Okay, they have an accident and they're all sprawled on the road. Who knows? They ran into each other. Whatever happened, right? They hit some gravel. I don't know. Whatever. But they're sprawled on the road and on the very small shoulder that does exist. That's not wide enough for a car, but it does exist. So they're sprawled on the road. Okay, so they're sprawled in your lane. They're sprawled all over the tiny shoulder that's there, and you have these semi trucks going the other way. What does your car do? Let's assume, I mean, obviously your car would probably brake and try and stop, right? But let's assume that you're going so fast and you came around a corner when this happened, and it's not physically possible to stop in time. Okay, let's say it's not physically possible. So what does your car decide to do? Does it hit the bicyclists going, whatever speed while it's braking? Does it go left and put you into the middle of the semi-trucks that are passing by, which is dangerous obviously for you, but it's also dangerous for the trucks. If you're in a small car, they'll probably be fine, but nonetheless, there is a risk out of them as well. Or 3, does your car drive off the side of the cliff? Now you're wondering, why would the car drive off the side of the cliff? Well, if you think about it, likely what we will program into these autonomous vehicles is to preserve the most life possible, right? Drive in the safest way possible and preserve the most life possible. Well, what if the scenario happens where somebody has to die, right? Physically, the physics dictates that you cannot stop in time. Somebody will likely get seriously injured or die. So what does your car do? Does your car make a decision based on the least amount of people who may be injured or killed, right? So if you think of that scenario, if you run into this horde of bikers, you might run 3, 4, 5 of them over. That's definitely going to be injuries. Will some of them die? Maybe. It really depends, right? If your car goes into the oncoming traffic, there's a risk that oncoming traffic. If you're hitting, let's say, a semi-truck, likely you will die. In a small car, if you're going, 100 kilometers an hour, 60 miles an hour, they're going the same, you're probably likely going to die or be severely injured. Again, what happens to those trucks, right? If you're talking about a narrow road, do they pop a tire? Do they then run the risk of going off the cliff? Do they hit the side of the mountain? If there's a mountain on the other side of the road, if they also don't have a shoulder, it's just straight rock, do they hit that? There is a risk to them as well. On the flip side, what's the risk to either of those two groups if you just drive off the cliff? That's probably not good for you. You will likely die in that scenario. But in the grand scheme of things, if you have 6 cyclists who are sprawled all over the pavement, and you have, let's say, 3 trucks, one behind another, and you, right, let's say those trucks each have a person in them, there's 3 people in there, so that's 9 people, plus you is a 10th, right? I mean, if you really think about this logically, the least chance of the least amount of potential loss of life is to drive you off the cliff. So does your car do that? And this is a serious question. I mean, this is something I actually hadn't thought of at all. As we start putting intelligence into these self-driving cars, into anything like that, they will start making decisions, right, based on what we input as the parameters. And if the parameter is, drive the safest as possible, drive within the rules, and preserve the most amount of life that you can, the answer to that is going to be, it's going to drive off the side of the cliff, because that will preserve, that will have the highest probability of preserving the highest amount of life as possible, right? Because really, you're only at risk. And honestly, I mean, if it's not too far down, maybe you'll just get injured, right? No loss of life at all. Perfect. If it is like 1,000 feet down, you're probably going to die. But again, that's one person dead, 6 cyclists alive, and 3 truck drivers fine, right? That's 1 out of 10. As opposed to, let's say, okay, your car goes and hits those cyclists and 3 of them die, right? The probability of the greatest saving of life is going to be driving off that cliff. But would you accept that? Would you accept that as what's going to happen? I don't know. I'm not sure about you guys, but if I'm in the car, I'm probably going to be pissed. I'm going to go, damn it, I bought this thing for $50,000 and now it drove me off the side of a cliff. It's going to kill me on purpose. I mean, right? I mean, it's something to think about. And it's something that, quite frankly, I don't think a lot of people have thought about. Even people working in the industries and for the companies building these vehicles, I don't think they've thought of it. All we've ever heard of and seen is these autonomous cars save lives, right? They get in less accidents. They don't speed. They don't drive drunk, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. They will be good for bringing the accident numbers down. But it doesn't mean that accidents can't happen. There may be situations where your car drives into a situation. It can't tell beforehand what's coming up. It's around a corner, or something happens literally in front of it that is unexpected. And then it has to make a decision. And that decision may not be favorable for the occupant of that car, right? And that's something we haven't thought of. This is an example of basically artificial intelligence and what that means for us as humans, okay, as what we call living, breathing, flesh and bone sort of thing. And that's, at what point do we allow artificial intelligence to make decisions that will affect whether we live or die, right? And I mean, if we scale this back a little bit, right? This is about vehicles, this is about self-driving, right? Like this is a future state. But if we look at right now, I mean, we already allow certain things to be decided upon by automated systems, right? I mean, I won't go as far as to say it's artificial technology, or sorry, artificial intelligence, but we do have automated systems, right? Like, I can tell you there's lots of times I've gone in, I've acquired a new client. So for those of you who don't know and haven't seen my other videos, please watch the other videos. But I own a third party IT services provider, or an MSP, if you know that term, managed services provider. So I have clients, right? And I have clients and I administer the networks of those clients. I've gone in to prospective clients who are looking to hire me on, to hire my company on. And I've done assessments on systems. And then many times when I have actually gotten that client and I start looking through their systems, changing passwords and things like that, and getting access to their systems, I have noticed that a lot of other providers, other IT service providers, other MSPs, they rely heavily on automated systems, automated technology, especially when it comes to firewalls and things like that, right? People will set like firewalls to do a lot of automated tasks, intrusion prevention service, intrusion detection services. People will just set to prevent all on whether it's a low risk, high risk, medium risk, whatever. They'll just set it to prevent all. Anti-spam systems, right? I mean, those are pretty automated. They just go prevent all, right? Block everything. Firewalls, I mean, general best practice in a firewall is you deny all outbound to inbound traffic, and then you open up what you need, right? That's generally what you do. But just for say, I mean, that's an automated rule too, right? You have told the piece of equipment to block everything. Now, the thing is, what I have found, and I will say this 100%, there is not a single client I have gotten where, if they had a previous provider and they had infrastructure that was in place, firewalls, whatever, servers, etc., not one firewall or UTM, Universal Threat Management appliance, has been monitored, has active monitoring on it. Log files being sent to somebody or somebody logging in and looking at things. Not a single one. Never seen evidence of it, never seen anybody show me that they've been doing anything. Clients have all said, no, I don't think anybody does anything, right? And I've seen this day in, day out. Every client I've gone, I've never seen somebody who actually watches firewall logs and keeps tabs on what's going on. And this is a huge problem, right? So I'll give you an example. I had one client. They brought us on. They were very unhappy with their old provider. They brought us on. I went and looked. First thing I do with all these systems is I activate all the logging, right? Backup logging, backup reporting, automated backup reporting, automated log files off firewalls, things like that, right? So I set all this stuff up. And I started getting these log files and I started watching, right? And what I found was, and it's funny actually, they actually fired their previous provider because, there were a number of reasons, but there was an ongoing problem where somebody could not access the FTP server. So this client has an FTP server and they have a few groups that they deal with that upload things fairly regularly into this FTP server, large files that my client then has to do things with, okay? So this one particular group could not access the FTP server. They just couldn't, okay? And my client had said they had complained about this. They literally complained about this for almost a year, that this group could 9 times out of 10 not upload anything or access the FTP server. Okay, so I was brought in, or my group was brought in. It was me that set up all the logging and everything, and I started watching this. Okay, and on the list of things to do, because when you take a new client on, if they're unhappy with the old provider, they generally have a huge list of things that just haven't been fixed. So they gave me this list, and I was looking through the list, and this was on the list, of course. So I'm like, okay, I have to look at that. I have to deal with that for sure. Let me set up the login. I'm going to start looking at that. That's the first thing I'm going to do. And I started going through the logs, and sure enough, I saw that someone was trying to connect to the FTP port that this client was using. It was just an IP address on from the web, and they're trying to access my client's FTP port, and they're being blocked. They're being blocked by the intrusion prevention system, and the intrusion prevention system is preventing them, like blocking them out, because it's stating there is a low priority attack, and it gave the unique ID of the attack it thought it was. If I remember correctly, it thought it was an ActiveX banner of some sort. I actually don't remember exactly. I would have to go and look, but it was an ActiveX banner that it was unhappy with, and yeah, so it was blocking this. So okay, whatever. I had that in the back of my head. Okay. Then I started going through the list, the higher priority things, and then this was kind of a medium priority thing. And then so I contacted this group, and first thing I said was, because I thought about this was in the back of my mind, I said, give me your public IP address, your real world IP address. So I walked them through how to get that. They gave me their IP address. I cross-referenced that, and sure enough, this was that group. So the IP address of the group, okay, was the IP address that I was seeing in those log files as being blocked by the intrusion prevention service. So I said, okay, how are you guys trying to access this FTP server? They're using an FTP client, so I remoted in with one of the individuals working for this group, and I had a look at the particular piece of software they were using, the client software. And then I did some research on it, and it turns out that certain intrusion prevention systems were were um, uh, were were mistaking this FTP client as a malicious attack using an ActiveX banner. And part of it was just how the packets were being sent to initiate the FTP protocol, to start the protocol, and to allow the user in so they could transfer files. Um, Again, I would have to go through it. This is actually quite some time ago. This is about 2 years ago now. And but basically, the gist of it is this piece of FTP client software was being mistaken for something malicious. But the thing is, it wasn't something malicious, right? And again, this is something pretty simple. I'm just looking at logs, I'm seeing what's going on, I'm doing a little bit of research, and I find this out. So, you know, basically what did I do? I made an exception for their IP address, and, away they go, right? But this is one of those things, right? You leave something to an automated system, and it makes a decision. It sees what it believes, what it interprets as an intrusion attempt, right, using a known exploit. So it blocks it, despite the fact that it's not an intrusion attempt and it's trying to access a legitimate service, right? But this is the thing. You leave that to an automated system, and then you just ignore it. You don't look at it again. You don't look at log files. Hey, it's automated. It's set. Away you go. And then there's a problem with it. And then that's it, right? Like, you don't deal with that. Oh, I'm not sure what it is, or I can't fix that. I have no idea, right? And this is something you need to think about. Again, we were talking about cars and automated cars. That's the future. But the present already has a lot of automation, especially in the IT field, right? When it comes to, especially with firewalls, switches, routers, UTMs, Universal Threat Management appliances, anti-spam systems, these are all automated, right? I mean, how many times have you had a client, for those of you that are MSPs or IT service providers, or if you're working in IT, a coworker, a user, or whatever, how many times have you heard, hey, I didn't get this email that I should have gotten. Oh, it was incorrectly spam filtered. Now, by no means am I suggesting that you can manually filter spam. You don't want to manually filter spam. Trust me. Especially if you are a large enterprise that gets a large volume of emails, that means you get a large volume of spam. Thousands, tens of thousands of spam attempts a day. You don't want to do that manually. But it's just something to think about, where, how many times has someone said, my legitimate message was spam filtered? And it is, right? So if that's the case, and that's been happening for a long time, that's happening for years. I would argue it's been happening for 15 years, right? But again, this is something where we have an automated system, and we've set it up a certain way, and we believe it'll do certain things, but it's going beyond what we intended. It is now filtering legitimate emails that it thinks are spam, but we don't want it to do that. We want it to just filter the spam, right? And again, we now look at firewalls, all these more advanced UTMs. I say UTM, and that's primarily the term that I use, is Universal Threat Management Appliance. I don't call them firewalls anymore, right? For small offices, you generally, even for medium-sized offices, I would argue even for some larger offices, you don't really have a dedicated firewall and a dedicated intrusion prevention appliance and a dedicated anti-spam appliance, and like really all these separate appliances are actually being consolidated into what's called Universal Threat Management Appliance. So that does firewall, it does VPN, it does anti-spam, it does intrusion prevention, it does gateway antivirus and anti-malware. It has all these things in it in one package, in one appliance. Okay, and I would argue, if you're not deploying Universal Threat Management appliances now, you really should be. Again, unless you're a company of 5,000 users, right? And it makes sense to to segregate those services. Yes, of course, there are special use cases everywhere. Absolutely. That being said, I would argue we should be doing like 99% universal threat management. Absolutely. So, anyways, now looking at universal threat management, and that's what's being deployed nowadays into production environments. Now you have these systems and they're completely automated, right? Intrusion prevention, automated, anti-spyware, automated, firewall, automated. It's all automated. But if no one's looking at that and watching it and understanding what's going on, then what happens is legitimate things will get filtered out. Just like this client that had a group that couldn't FTP in. And it's because for whatever reason, that FTP client software that group was using was being tagged as an intrusion attempt and was being blocked automatically. No user intervention, right? So I went in and made some adjustments and voila, it works. And they can FTP again, right? And again, keep in mind, for an entire year, the previous provider couldn't solve the issue. It literally took me more than 15, 30 minutes, half an hour to fix the issue, and realize what was going on, doing the research and all that, plus whatever time it took to look through all those logs. But I mean, it was hours that I was looking through logs, not just for that issue, but just looking overall. And the problem was solved. So again, it's one of those things where you really need to pay attention, and even though a system's automated, doesn't mean you can leave it alone. You need to think about everything that's going on and all of the potential things that could be going on, right? And again, with this self-driving car, right? I mean, we all look at it and we go, hey, that's cool. I can do things in the car now other than driving. Productivity increases, right? I can be on the phone again. I can text. I can email. I can read a book. Accidents will go down. Speeding will go down. Drunk driving really won't be an issue anymore. You can get in your car drunk. Take me home. Doesn't matter, right? But the other side of that, if you look on a whole, is your life may no longer be in your hands. Your life, whether you live and die in your car, live or die in your car, may not be your choice anymore. Your car might decide that the greater good is that you die, right? And that's things we need to start thinking about. I mean, that's a philosophical discussion for society on a whole, my opinion. But I mean, reeling it back into how it affects us as technology professionals. I mean, again, these automated systems are already out there. They're widespread. We really don't think about it, but the UTM. I mean, that is a pretty automated system, right? And how many people are out there watching these appliances? How many people are making sure they aren't filtering things they shouldn't be, or causing problems, or quite frankly, letting things in they shouldn't be, right? I mean, those are all things you have to think about. And I would argue, again, I know a lot of MSP business owners, I know a lot of IT service providers, I know a lot of people in this industry. I've networked quite a bit, especially outside my geographical area. My brother-in-law actually works in IT, works for an architectural firm in Europe. He lives in Europe. They manage their IT for all those employees internally. So, I mean, I know a lot of professionals, and the bottom line is, on a whole, the industry, the IT services industry really isn't thinking about these things. We're not looking at it, right? There's best practices. Yes, UTM, you set up that firewall so nobody can get in. You set up that intrusion prevention service and you're good, right? But it's like, you still need to watch it. There still needs to be a human being behind the system, ensuring it's working like it's supposed to, ensuring that things are happening as they should be. And again, from what I've seen, most of the time they're just left on autopilot. Nobody watches them. Nobody pays attention. So yeah, that's the video for now. And just so you guys know, I'll let you know, and I will be mentioning this in other videos as well. I do plan to upload every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. Again, I would love to do it every single day, including the weekend. Trust me, I'm actually filming this on a Saturday on the weekend. But unfortunately, again, for those of you who have been following me or know who I am, I live in an area, I live in the Yukon, in northern Canada. We're basically on the Canadian side of Alaska, so we're pretty far up north. The ISP here that we have here does not offer unlimited usage on internet, so I am capped by the amount of gigabytes I get to upload and download every month. And every video, I mean, I'm taking 720p video off of a smartphone. It's a BlackBerry Priv. BlackBerry Priv, for those of you who like Android smartphones, excellent phone, excellent phone. I've been a BlackBerry fan since day one, even through their troublesome times. I was still a BlackBerry user, absolutely. I have used Android, I have used an iPhone. I still love BlackBerry. And this is their first Android-powered smartphone, and I have to say they did an excellent, excellent job. But again, so I'm recording using the front-facing camera, and it records in 720p. And you know, a half-hour video is like 3 gigs. It's just under 3 gigs, most of them. So you know, when you think about that, I get like, you know, not a whole lot of usage at home. I don't actually want to say, because it's kind of pathetic. But let's just say the bottom end package, if I remember correctly, starts at 40 gigs a month of usage. So if you think about that, you know, 3 gigs of video, that eats it up pretty quick, especially if you're doing things like Netflix, if you're hopping on Facebook, watching other YouTube videos, things like that, it goes pretty quick. So yeah, unfortunately, I will be uploading Monday, Wednesday, Friday. That's the bandwidth I can afford to consume. So that's what I will be doing. But I hope to always have 3 videos a week consistently. We will see how that goes. Hopefully, maybe I can up it if I compress them a bit. I will be playing around a little bit with compression of video. I really don't want to kill the quality that much. I am happy with the 720p. It's not 4K. It's not 60 frames per second, etc., etc. But honestly, I mean, 720p is not bad. It's not horrible to watch. It's not pixelated and blocky and all that stuff. So, and quite frankly, I haven't had any complaints so far for the quality. So yeah, that's yeah, that's pretty much it for this video. So I will see you guys at the next one.